What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Today we are talking about Season 3, Episode 13, Life Support. A couple of important things. I am not on the surface of the sun. This is actually, we're recording in the afternoon, and this is the exact moment, like we have Manhattan Henge directly through the bushes, headed directly into my face here in the basement. So, but that's okay. It's going to get better as the show goes along. And Mike, I already know you're in a crunchy mood, so we're going to cheer you up by talking about a long sequence of a man dying in front of us.
Listen, Keith, I say this to you officially. All the people in the YouTube world are my witnesses. Should it come to pass that I am thrown into a vegetative state, and the only way to keep me going is to replace some or all of my brain is as an android, and I might lose all emotional attachment to my feelings and to the world at large.
How would we tell the difference?
Well, it doesn't matter. Moot.
Yeah.
I give you full permission to do the full brain. I don't need any. I need nothing. I need no emotions.
Just go ahead and be the robot.
Just make me a robot. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, good to know, folks. I had to sign some papers over, like, what did I want to do with my surgery, and so which went great, by the way. If anybody hadn't heard, I'm feeling much better. But yeah, now I had to start thinking about, like, who do I want pulling my plug? These are one of these important questions. And,
I'm happy to come give it a yank if you need me, man. Whatever you need.
Every time you come to the house, you're just like unplugging random stuff. I don't know what.
Like, maybe it'll work. Who knows?
I don't know. If you thought there was electricity going through me, you'd sorely mistaken. Well, it's going to be an interesting discussion. I'm excited to talk about it. But before we do, we have to do that thing that we do, and that is thank our patrons, who you can find at patreon.com/K&M. Mike, who's patroning the patron?
Keith, good mood, bad mood, indifferent, in between. We've always got the support emotionally and fiscally of Bryant, Kimball, Beersock, Wyatt. Welcome to the team, Eldridge, Casey, Lois and Clark, Jason, Moa, Bren, Joshua, Henry, Andrew Hayes. I can't do it. Andrew Hayes, Jorge, Nalo, and the Mysterious Wharfs. Big ol' Boo Shivs, Richard Coleman, Charles Bibich, CRM Productions, Nikolay Ivanovich Lobachevsky, at Grim_Toys, Delusions at Noon, and those who send us things in the mail and get a pat on the back for it. JD Makes, Colin, Dagan, Chris, Mitchell, CRM, big old Pat. Backwards, that's Tap, Keith, did you know that? And Joshua Cronin. You can join the team, get all kinds of goodies. Patreon.com/K&M, but nothing more important than knowing that this show is solely and wholly produced by you.
Yeah, well, and we very much appreciate it. I moved the curtain down a little bit, but check this out, right? This is just my hands. Cool, huh?
Oh, wow, that's cool.
I think it's cool.
It's rad, dude. Super rad.
I mean, it takes a lot of effort to be this white. I am my own light source.
I think I have to take CEO Jen out to dinner tonight. She might be mad at me.
I think you probably should. Ugh. When in doubt, take CEO Jen to dinner. That's very wise. Well, you want to know who I'd like to take out to dinner? All the folks who give us ratings for last week's episode, which was Past Tense Part 2. And we've got a lot of opinions on this, some really fascinating thoughts, all of which you can read in the YouTube comments below, which is where you can put your rating for this episode, which we will read next week. See, it's this whole time time thing, but you definitely
it's a whole thing.
Want to participate because it's fun for us. So we finished up the time travel sequence, Past Tense Part 1 and 2, and the viewer ratings are as such. Joshua Cronin only gives it a 70. Wasn't a fan of the sequence. Jason Moe gives it a 90. Delusions at Noon gives it an 82. Eric Crump, new person I don't think has given a rating before. Welcome. Gives it a 90. JD gives it a 90. Harry Pothead also gives it a 90. A lot of 90s out there. I think because I was a 90 as well. Very influential. And Sans Didi comes in with the super tip, which means I read your comment. You can join Sans Deity every week if you care to, who said, This episode is truly amazing, and I really enjoyed your analysis of it as well, guys.
Thanks.
I completely agree with Keith that it would be extremely problematic to replace Gabriel Bell with a white guy. Yes, Avery Brooks would not have allowed that to happen. Speaking of Brooks, he's all over the place in this episode, but in the best of ways. His performance is extremely layered and a bit of a microcosm of his character. Throughout the series, he has to wear many hats: father, emissary, friend, commanding officer, widower, diplomat, warrior, and has this is encapsulated in his multifaceted performance in this episode. That is really true. Every one of those hats that you outlaid there are essential pieces of the character. His empathy and ability to change his tactics or tone based on whom he is dealing with is exactly what makes him the best captain in Star Trek history. Shots fired. Come at me, bro. I'm not coming. These two parts don't feel very Star Trek to me, if that makes any sense. I think the other series, especially Next Gen, would have had more scenes on the Defiant or more back on the station. The claustrophobic and depressing settings of the Sanctuary District is an important character to the story. I realize that production costs were largely the reason that didn't happen, but I think TNG would have made the choice and focused less on the gritty things this episode did. I agree.
Mm-hmm.
The Hat Guy is another microcosm of what DS9 is about, showing that the bad guys aren't all bad and the good guys don't always have the answers. Yes, I think that's absolutely true. Isn't it Delusions also pointed out the fact that that Hat Guy, we maybe redeemed him, soft pedaled him a little too hard, because even I forgot. Oh, right. He murdered Gabriel Bell.
Was Hat Guy who did that? Oh, yes, he did.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, he gave the kid a hat at the end. Oh, he's so, he's like such a nice guy. No, the only reason we're here is because he murdered Gabriel Bell. But I think both of those things are true. And lastly, Sans Deity says, and something else Next Gen didn't get, and why Deep Space Nine is superior, in my opinion, since this is a slightly better episode than Part 1, although in fairness to Part 1, this episode is not as strong without the excellent setup that Part 1 provides. I give this 89 self-sealing stem bolts, and hell yes, they're self-sealing, bucko! It would perhaps be higher if I didn't want to leave room for how many banger episodes the later seasons bring us, but a very solid episode nonetheless. Yeah, 100%. I mean, I've said this many times before to Mike. As we get through these great episodes, we're still. I think we've seen 2 or 3 of the top 25 episodes of the series.
Okay,
and that I think almost all of the top 10 are still to come, which is pretty cool. All right, and lastly, we have to hear from Chancellor Jen, who Mike will be taking out to dinner tonight, as he should, who says, you guys, I did watch and give a rating last week, 98, and I'm sticking with my blind rating of 98.5 for this one. I loved it, Chancellor Jen. Fantastic. We're gonna have to bump up the ceiling a little bit for Jen.
Remember, you have the supercharger, Keith. It still exists. Should you choose to use it, we made that lore.
With great power comes great supercharging responsibilities. All right, so Mike, what do you say? We start talking about life support. Season 3, episode 13, a consequential episode to some extent. It aired on January 30th, 1995. The top song, I can't wait to hear it. And you were warming up a little bit before when we were starting. Okay, the top song is Creep, but not that one. It's the TLC Creep.
But I'm a creep, creepity, creepity, petty, petty, creepity, creepity. Not, no? That was pretty good.
I see what you were trying to do there, and it was a better attempt than I think I would have pulled off myself. So hats off. Sorry, TLC. We will not be taking a YouTube strike for that.
Bariel sort of was a creep, creepity, deepity. Now he's in a deep sleep. All right, you got your rhyme for the week.
Yeah, there you go. No, Bariel was never a creep.
No.
He just suffered from utter lack of chemistry.
Yeah, him and Kira together gave me the creeps.
Yes, I will say that. I will say that. The top movie continued to be Legends of the Fall. Third week at the top of the
third week in a row. I don't know the plot of that movie.
Didn't really clock how big of a deal that episode was. So now it is time to find out what was on TV that night.
Oh, Keith, I can't wait to tell you. To be honest,
January 30th, 95.
It was a big one.
Big doings.
Yeah, did you know?
Probably not.
That Cops was on TV?
Well, yes. Actually, that was probably a fair assumption.
Yeah, and The Nanny, of course, Dave's World, which, Keith and I loved. Sybil, still rocking. Chicago Hope was David E. Kellying. But let's talk about what the important thing was. Keith, Star Trek Voyager.
Yes, we're going to talk more about it.
UPN. And it was a big lead-in because Keith, I can't wait to ask you this trivia question because I will literally fall out of my chair if you can tell me the answer to this.
Okay.
So, Star Trek Voyager, 8 p.m. on UPN. It was a big old
Sure, well, it's a flagship show of UPN. They launched with Voyager.
And do you know what they were like? Well, we need to put a great show after it because we're going to get all those lead-ins, right? Do you know what show came on after Star Trek Voyager on UPN?
Okay, couple questions. Was it a UPN property that they created themselves?
I'm going to have to say yes because I've never heard of this before. And I can't imagine anyone would have approved of this. So
it's before Buffy. I have absolutely no idea, so I'm gonna vote with my heart. And if anybody gets this reference, like a cookie, go eat a cookie. I'm gonna say Acapulco Heat.
Whew, that is not right, but also an amazing guess. It was Platypus Man, which was a UPN original network sitcom based upon the stand-up comedy of Richard Jenny.
Okay.
I wish I could tell you how long it ran, but that's all I got for you.
I'm assuming not that long.
No, couldn't tell you who Richard Jenny was either. But also, I wanted to tell you that evening we also had the 22nd Annual American Music Awards of 1995, Keith, and here are some of the people who took home some of here are some of the performances. Little Richard did a performance. They matched up with the Go-Go's to perform Tutti Frutti.
Ooh.
Celine Dion gave us a stunning rendition of Power of Love. God bless you, Celine. We're with you. Boys to Men gave you On Bended Knee, Keith, which we talked about. The Crash Test Dummies gave you.
I talk about like a guilty pleasure. I love Crash Test Dummies.
I'm right with you.
I saw them live in Rochester.
Did you really?
Oh my God! It was in college. So this was like 10 years after. No, it wasn't 10 years. It was like 7 or 8 years later. Like they had their big hit, and they had like completely in Rochester, New York at that point. Not a particularly great area, and they had this like abandoned sculpture park modern thing they put in the 70s and has been like a war zone ever since. And like they broomed out the crack needles. And for whatever reason, they had a Crash Test Dummies concert like under this concrete structure. And like I went there with my college girlfriend, and it was weird, but I was like, let's do this.
That's cool. I drove from Rochester to Binghamton to see Wesley Willis, who was a very controversial music performance because he was a schizophrenic street musician who made some really crazy tunes, and a lot of people were making fun of him at the time. He had kind of gotten picked up by the Howard Stern show, and a lot of people were poking fun at. But I really enjoy batshit music, like your Tiny Tims and things that are just like some avant-garde, but more so when the musicians don't know they're making avant-garde music. I don't know, it's a whole thing. Anyway, that's my reference point. We also had Madonna and Babyface did a mashup of Take a Bow. And then there was other stuff, but we also got a performance from Prince. Prince was there, and anytime Prince was there, I'm going to have to go YouTube it. So there you go. That's what was on TV here, January 30th, 1995?
1995. All right. Well, speaking of things that were very important in 1995, we're This was right around the OJ trial. And luckily, in the Weekly World News headline, he's got an out because North Korea is offering OJ asylum.
Ooh.
There it is, political asylum. So that's a good. That's because this Weekly World News. I would 100% believe that. That would not surprise me in the slightest.
Wacky North Korean President Kim Jong-il II is obsessed with O.J. Simpson and has officially offered to grant him political asylum if he can escape to the Asian nation! !
I mean, Kim Jong-un and what's his nuts? The basketball player.
Dennis Rodman.
Dennis Rodman.
Wow, that was almost wow. Okay.
So it was so close. So close. All right. So let us get back into the Star Trek world and announce that life support was directed by Reza Badi'i, who last directed Past Tense Part 1. So, but this aired a couple weeks later, so I think they had a couple
Wait, should we
weeks
play the
off.
promo?
We will, shortly.
Oh, okay, I didn't know where we were going to put that. Okay.
But I don't know what was Voyager doing is in a weird place in the rundown. But you know what? It is where it is, and we're gonna roll with it. So this episode was written by Ronald D. Moore with a story by Christian Ford and Roger Soffer. Both of them as only Trek. They pitched the idea, but they went on to write. Speaking of legendary basketball players, Mike, can you think about an amazing cinematic achievement starring an achievement in basketball that they may have written?
Amazing basketball achievement that they may have.
A basketball player, a basketball player as good at basketball as they were bad at acting.
Okay, help me out here. Michael Jordan.
No. Think much. Well, think both much taller, but much worse.
Much worse actor, much taller. Manute Bol?
No, it was Kazam.
Oh, with Shaq.
With Shaq, they wrote Kazam.
Kadam.
That went well. All right, let's do some trivial trivia. What do you say?
Yeah. Okay. I don't think the buttons work anymore. So
Come on, Mike, cheer up. We're having fun. We're doing Deep Space Nine.
Oh, I'm having so much fun.
We're making Kazam jokes.
I've never had more fun.
Now, Keith, waste your time.
With what?
With trivial trivia. Oh, we're going to continue our hostage video with some trivia.
I'm having the best time.
Mike, can you hold up a newspaper to just prove what day it is?
Like a beard.
All right, so the story pitch from Ford and Soffer was actually a Frankenstein story, with Bashir playing the part of Victor Frankenstein. And it didn't originally involve Bariel.
Oh, really? Who were they going to kill?
Well, that's the thing, and perhaps why they did Bariel. So, when they realized the audience wouldn't care about the Frankenstein guy if they didn't know him, they actually considered killing off O'Brien.
Stupid.
Because they were nervous he was going to leave the show to do films.
Oh, well.
When he reassured them this was not the case, they switched it to Bariel for obvious reasons. Also, Louise Fletcher had a horrible flu while filming this episode, which weirdly, watching it with that knowledge, I'm like, I can totally see that she is crazy.
I guess she is pretty subdued.
She's very subdued, and she feels, and like, I have questions and thoughts about her depiction throughout this whole episode, but I can definitely that is a very sick actor working. Okay. This is Kira's third hairstyle of the series.
Definitely new hairstyle.
The shortest of the bobs from, not even a bob, it's just not a page boy, it's just hair. Producers, everyone loves to dunk on Bariel, right? Everyone's like, aha, we yelled him and he's gone and nobody liked him and he was weird. But you know what? Producers received angry emails, very early emails at this point, from a group called themselves the Friends of Vedic Bariel, with pictures from a memorial service they did after Bariel died. So
I just think the romance is what ruined the character for me. And like I think some of those early episodes where he was running for Pope and then we went down to the planet, I thought he was pretty solid there. So
yeah, I mean,
can understand that.
I think the concept of the character that is like the progressive cool guy running for Pope, especially as a antagonist to Win, as the person we're rooting for, and then Win comes in, like that all really makes a lot of sense. I think you're right. I think they went wrong with the romance of it all, because that's when it felt weird and I wasn't on board. All right, so now it is time to talk about what Star Trek Voyager was doing. Guys, Star Trek Voyager is now airing. Deep Space Nine is now no longer the only Star Trek show happening. And by the time this aired, we were actually on the 3rd episode of Voyager. Time and again aired the same night as Life Support. But just as a little treat and to eat up any chance of monetization of this episode, I don't care. Here is the first promo for the premiere of Star Trek Voyager.
Oh, how anticlimactic. Oh, we're just dimming the lights.
Yeah. There you go.
It began as a routine mission.
There appears to be a massive displacement wave moving toward us.
And it would change their destiny.
Captain, there's something out there.
Brace for impact.
One crew and one ship's epic journey 70,000 light years away.
We're on the other side of the galaxy.
Now it's a quest to get back home.
Why are you holding us here?
See it from the beginning
We have no way back unless you send us.
on the premiere of Star Trek Voyager.
There it is, folks.
The special effects weren't great.
No, they weren't. They improved greatly as the
good.
series went along.
Good.
But yes, Caretaker, not one of the better received pilots, which was unfortunate because Voyager is one of those shows where you have to go back and watch it all again to really appreciate. It got way better.
Well, that's good.
And it actually, all of the non-next gen shows have built a much better reputation in hindsight than they had at the time. Deep Space Nine being one of them. So anyway, there it is. So
actually, last night we were watching a show and my mom was explaining to her what the Deep Space Nine companion was. And she's like, well, I never watched that Deep Space. What do you think about it? I was like, actually, Mom, you should check it out. It's right up your alley. She loves sci-fi and like serial stuff.
She
There's
does?
a ton of to watch, yeah. And I was like, oh, this'll crunch a lot of time. So go ahead. Deep Space. So I think my mom's in on Deep Space Nine. Will she listen to the podcast,
What?
Keith? Hard no.
hard no. Oh my god, I am shocked and delighted that Rita is going to join us on the All right, so but you have to, whenever you can, whatever she's watched, we have to get a rating from her.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
From episode, like it'll be a random episode, and she won't remember any of it.
She tends
but
to
I
fall
definitely...
asleep in the middle of stuff and then rewatch things a million times. So it's going to be an adventure for sure. Might take her years.
That's fine. It's going to take us years.
That's fair. That's fair.
So there it is. All right. So the guest stars on life support included Philip Anglim as Vedic Bariel, R.I.P., Aaron Eisenberg as Nog, Lark Voorhees as Leanne, Ann Gillespie as Jabara, and Andrew Prine as Terrell, and of course, Louise Fletcher as Kai Wynn. I think it's time to hop into the screening room.
Let's do it. Bended knee creep.
Okay, so we begin our teaser with Jake walking through the promenade when a pretty and seemingly age-appropriate girl comes up to him and not so casually just lets it slip that she's single now.
Keith.
And yes?
If I told you she asked Jake to go to the Max, would you know what I was talking about?
I would have no idea what you mean.
She's from Saved by the Bell.
About that. Well,
Yeah.
see, say she looks like somebody I should know who that is.
Yeah, she's Saved by the Bell. She's great. I'm trying to remember her name in that show. We had AC Slater, Jesse Kelly. I'm going to look it up.
Okay.
No, I'm not. I'm not going to do that.
Played by Lark Voorhees.
She's great.
So she asks Jake out. Good job, Jake. And he's got a date at the Klingon restaurant. There you go. I don't know how romantic. I mean, I guess it's like a running gag on Deep Space Nine that the Klingon restaurant is like the most romantic spot.
Mm-hmm.
You'll need some gach. Then Odo and security run through the promenade. There's a medical emergency on the Bajoran transport ship. They get there and smoke comes out and Kai Wynn emerges with a grievously injured Vedic Bariel. Odo does a good job of pretending he's not happy about it when he calls and tells Kira, who has a new haircut.
Yes, she does.
So in Act 1, Kira, with that new hair, stands in the infirmary nervously. O'Brien explains what happened. Wynn asks if it might have been sabotage. I don't think we ever get an answer
We do not.
as to what happened there. That's weird. Why don't we get an answer on that?
Well, it seems important because if it was sabotage or if they were attacked, that's like, I mean, it would stand to reason. I mean, that's actually kind of a cool plot line. We got these really important talks, negotiations taking place, like a treaty. Maybe they don't want that treaty to be completed. Somebody might attack them. I don't know.
Or if the Cardassians are getting their asses handed to them by Bariel and know that Wynn is not as confident, they take out Bariel. I don't know. It's looking back on it, it is really weird that we don't actually ever answer that question. But we don't. So meanwhile, Bashir is fighting to keep Bariel alive, and the surgery is not going well. But I do like seeing the red surgical outfits we remember from The Next Generation. So those are the Federation surgical silliness.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know that Picard has a bionic heart?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, and we have a whole big surgery thing where we have replaced Picard's heart.
I mean, so you know what? I like a big swing, and those suits are surely that.
Are you asking? Is that just a clever way to ask for that for your birthday?
I won't wear it, so don't waste your money.
I will give you $10 whole if you wear that outfit.
Oof, I gotta think about it.
I think if I wore it, I'd be like playing a blood clot in the school play. I'm the blood clot. You don't want me here.
Not all heroes wear capes, Keith.
Ow! I can't laugh.
Oh, yeah,
I just had my own surgery.
Oh no! Ping, ping, ping. That's Keith's sutures coming out.
That's right. Oh, goodness gracious. All right. So in Sisko's office, Wynn announces that they've been negotiating peace with Cardassia, and Bariel has been setting up the big meeting for 5 months, and they've been working on reparations, ambassadors, and possibly even an apology.
That's big.
Sisko is shocked that Wynn, of all people, would be the person to do this, and she says it's Bariel, actually, and she openly admits that she would not have been as helpful in his place. So, it's interesting because, like, we know Wynn has already been collaborating with the Cardassians, but in a corrupt way. But clearly, Bariel is coming at it from straightforwardly. But it is interesting to see Wynn's vulnerability here. And it happens throughout the entire episode. Like, I'd be curious what you think about, like, why is she so vulnerable and not confident, not having Bariel be a part of this?
This was a huge plot hole or wormhole for me. I found a way to make it work for myself that I'm not particularly happy with, but I think let's save it for the conversation at the end. Because I think it weighs heavily on my feelings as the episode as a whole.
I agree. So let's put a pin in that. Mm-hmm. So Bashir comes out of surgery to give Kira the bad news. Bariel didn't make it. And she decides to keep working as opposed to deal with her grief, which is, I guess, a way of dealing with her grief. Makes sense to me. So Bashir begins the autopsy, starting with a neural scan, when his brain starts firing again. His neurons are active. So Bashir has a crazy plan to revive him with some medical technobabble. And he's gonna zap him with a bunch of stuff and make him live. Make him live. They zap him a bunch of times, and Bariel wakes up. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, so the thing they put over his head, they used two different things to put over his head, and the prop master showed up on the day of filming and realized that they completely reversed which one he was planning for which one.
Oh, interesting.
But it didn't matter. But it was he was like, "Yep, no, that's the opposite of what I planned." So
I thought the practical effects were pretty cool, or not the effects, the props were cool.
The props look great. One was like a zapper and one was a scanner or whatever. I just got it backwards. Doesn't matter. Look cool. Okay, so in Act 2, Bashir now thinks that Bariel's going to make a full recovery, and Cisco and Wynn are. Bashir is uncharacteristically modest about it. This is Bashir 2.0.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like there's been a pretty significant turn in Bashir, and now he's not like the obnoxious, annoying guy. So Wynn says, all right, we got to get back to work immediately. And she wants to invite the Cardassian legate to Deep Space Nine for the final talks, with Bariel advising. Which is another piece of this, right? So why... It's not like they had set this meeting for 8 hours from now. So
right.
what would be the problem with, all right, let's give him a few weeks to recover, then we do it? Because I feel like it's an arbitrary ticking clock that Wynn puts in right this very minute.
I guess because they're on the way there, maybe it was hard to organize it. I don't actually recall them explaining why it's such a big deal to do it now. But other than that, they're on their way.
But I'm not sure they were on their way.
Yeah,
because like at least like I could be wrong, and somebody explain it to me. Like, were they coming to Deep Space Nine for these talks, or
I don't think the talks are being held on the ship, right? Weren't they having?
Right, it was going to be held somewhere else at a later time, and now she's like, "Oh, we got to do it right this minute." So it's like an arbitrary ticking clock there. I don't quite get it. Anyway, Kira gets a private moment with her zombie boyfriend. They're going to play some spring ball, if you know what I mean. Meanwhile, Jake tells Nog that he's going to have to cancel their Domjot game because he's got a date. And Nog's like, great, I get it. Money is... And he says this line in a very creepy and disturbing way. Money is money, but women are better. It's very weird and gross. That was not a great take. Nog is thrilled and asks, all right, you've got a date. Who's my date? I'm coming along, and I'm assuming she's going to bring a friend for me. Can't see how that would go wrong. So in the infirmary, Bariel gives Wynn advice on the negotiations. Bashir enters and tells Bariel, and Bariel can tell that he has bad news. He's got inadequate blood flow to his organs. They have a pill for that now. Bashir wants to put him in stasis while he investigates how to solve it. But Bariel says, nope, I gotta make these talks work. Yeah, so like obviously serious enough, like I don't want you to like rest. We're gonna put you in stasis. So Bashir says...
because don't forget where we started. We started from dead.
We started from dead, yes.
You know what I mean? So then we're like back from dead.
Back from dead.
And now we're like on the track to dead again.
On the track to dead again.
And if I was like, Keith, listen, I know a podcast is important. I know it. I know that the patrons want the content, the internet wants the content. There are hundreds of people that need the content.
Tens of people are counting on us.
But if you do the podcast today, 20% chance, so 2 out of 10% chance, you're going to die.
Yeah.
Your brain's going to melt down. And you're like, no, I need to do the pod.
No, I mean, do you realize how much money we make on this? I mean, we make almost 30 cents an episode from YouTube ads, so I gotta be there. But weirdly though, because I enjoy it so much, I'll be like, I don't know.
Think about it. I know.
I don't think about it.
I like his cool side brain yarmulke contraption.
Well, and I was a little unclear from the production standpoint. Is that like a brain scan, Yamaka, or are we to believe that's his skull that they've exposed?
Oh, it has to be the former.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not his skull. I hope they don't think. I hope.
I mean, I was a little unclear.
Okay.
I was unclear. Anyway, Bashir says, I have an experimental drug which will allow you to function normally for a couple of days, but there is the risk of priapism. And in 22% of cases, like you said, it's going to kill you. And Bariel says, gimme. And Bashir, for reasons beyond my understanding, reluctantly agrees. Again, we have this arbitrary ticking clock. I don't get it.
Or you need to up the stakes to the point of like, I get how important the treaty is, right?
No, for sure.
I get that, but they need to amp it even more, right? Like the pressure needs to be. I have
to know why the treaty has to happen right friggin' now, as opposed to in a week or in 6 weeks, in a year, because we've basically been status quo for the entire time the show's been on.
Or when they have that sort of partial, in a couple scenes, and they have that partial negotiation without Bariel, and Leggett's kind of like just frustrated and whatever. They should use that opportunity to expose why it's happening now. Like he can even a throwaway line like, I am not free. We're not meeting. This meeting is now or never. He could have,
some sort of like there should be like a power shift. Like, like we have an incoming president who's never going to agree to this. We have exactly 4 days before he's inaugurated. We got to get this in now. Something like that. A sci-fi version of that, which made like, oh, okay, now I see why this has to happen now. I mean, obviously, the stakes of the peace talks very important. So, like, I understand that part of it. But anyway,
this is the scene.
Yeah, this is the scene. So in Act 3, Leggett Tyrell has arrived on the station, and Sisko is sitting in to help. They argue about Bajoran prisoners and detainees and war reparations, and he offers to pay them back for everything they've destroyed if they return everything of Cardassian origin. Wynn looks somewhat confused and outgunned. He leaves, and she tells Sisko that the Cardassian is up to something, but she doesn't know what, even though it seems fairly obvious. Wynn needs Bariel's help. She's feeling overwhelmed. Odd character beat. I don't understand. This is not the Kai Wynn we've met before.
We'll talk about it.
It was like 7 steps ahead of everybody. And also, like, where's her nefarious motive? She's going to have some sort of nefarious motive with this.
Totally toothless.
I'm confused. Why have they neutered Wynn?
They nerfed her.
Well, I know why they nerfed Wynn, because they needed a reason to kill Bariel. But, like, it doesn't make sense out of the context of, like, we need the stakes of the episode. Anyway, so we arrive at Jake's date, and Nog is not being helpful. He's wildly misogynistic and tells the women not to talk. He wants to take them to a violent holosuite. Kind of missing the point there. Then demands that she cuts up his food. Naturally, the girls storm off. Jake is furious, and they both storm off. So I didn't ask him to chew my food, at least. This storyline too, right? I get what they're trying to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's done. It's a very extreme and hackneyed way, which does not seem to match Nog's character at all. Like, culturally, yes, I totally get this is the Ferengi way of thinking, and that is culturally Nog's background. But the Nog that we have known through all of this at least wouldn't be so obtuse as to expect non-Ferengi females to not be offended by it.
I think that's going like a step too far.
Right.
Your analysis is giving it too much credit.
Oh.
I mean, like, they don't even pass go here. If the idea is the thesis presented by Ben in his speech to Jake a little bit later, if that is the idea, and that's cool, I think that's great. What a great little thing. What a great little moral, that you can't expect people to behave based on your set of principles, right? Now, we're going to get into a conversation in our in our summary where Mike has to ask the question, well, maybe, look, I'm all for understanding the variables in different cultures and the way they assess situations and whatnot, but if regardless of what the culture someone is from, if somebody behaves in a way that is so antithetical to how you behave and how you expect socially people to behave, well, it's not unfair to judge your friends based on that, I don't think. But we'll get to that. We'll talk about that.
Well, I mean, for sure. I mean, and it is an utterly relevant thing to do because, we live in a multicultural environment with people with different religions and political beliefs, and they all have different attitudes and
my
ideas.
Point here is that I think they just miss. They miss, right? If that's the point you're trying to make, what Ben brings up, there's a much easier way to tell the story or a better example, right? For example, they don't eat meat and we eat meat. It's a little more, well, you have to accept that difference and blah, blah, blah. When it comes to just overt sexism and misogyny, and it's all
it's playing it for a joke.
Yeah, and Ben shrugs it off. He doesn't even yeah, it's tough.
It needed to be done with a pencil, and they used a baseball bat.
Yeah,
and pushed themselves.
And is it supposed to be like the Quirky Bee story? Because
well, they do talk about that in the companion. It's just so each of these stories by themselves were fine, but together that is not a good combination of stories.
All right,
story tone wise.
But that's what happens.
That's what happens. We'll keep talking about it.
Yeah.
So in the infirmary, Bariel says, "We've already negotiated the Cardassian property part, and it's a no." He starts struggling, and Wynn demands that he gets more drugs. Finally, a Wynn we recognize. Bashir says, "Get out of here and stop bothering my patient." And after Wynn leaves, Bashir says, "Your organs have already been damaged by the drug. I'm going to have to replace them, but it might get worse." It is a much easier replacement of organs in the future. Bariel says, "I don't care. Keep me going whatever it takes." Yeah, I mean, again, there's no one else in the entire universe.
No, he's abreast on all of this. I get it. I totally get that. It's the why now, right? Because clearly, for the way they've set the table, he has all of the foresight and the knowledge. I mean, I guess they could have kept a log or a record or something, and she could have access to it on a pad. It seems pretty future able. Did cross-reference all of this? Or that she'd have a whole group of attachés with her to make sure. Regardless.
Yeah.
This is at a point where if he's sick and dying, even bad Wynn would be like, you know what? Let's pause the talks for a couple weeks till I can get him back firing 100%. Because if he's that vital to these talks, don't we want him at 100? I don't want Android you. I need Bariel. Right.
Again, reinforcing the missed opportunity to make it clear why it has to be right freaking now.
Mm-hmm. But see, here's another problem I have with it here. I always get my good stuff out before we get to the end.
It's fine. It's our own show. We can do whatever we want.
They go. Bariel's acting out of character too, because they never explain why. I understand once again why he is interested in securing this treaty for all of Bajor. Cool, get it. But Bashir's speech to her in this scene seems to imply that he's only doing it against his medical advice and against his own Bariel's own medical well-being, because he's under some sort of pressure from her, and that he can't come out from underneath her need for him. And he's like, release him from your, what did he say, your servitude or something. And I'm like, what? They don't ever go on to explain why that is, why he feels that pressure. It's weird.
And why is she become so utterly helpless?
And even in the scenes in previous episodes we've had with Kira and Bariel, they never go on to explain, oh, me and Wynn have become tight. We're bosom buddies now.
It once.
They did mention
it.
He said that she's allowing him to be more of a part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, but again, there's a lot of false stakes here.
Yes.
To justify the outcome. They wrote it backwards, right? Mm-hmm. They wrote it at the end, and then tried to find a way to get there working backwards. And they just, needed another rewrite. So Bashir goes to update Wynn. Bariel's organs have now been replaced, and he should be awake in about an hour. But he asks that she leave him alone and tell him he's not needed anymore, because she's going to kill him if she keeps going. Wynn is not particularly worried about that. She's got 15 iPads and stuff to do. He tries to appeal to her ego, which I think this is the best writing in the episode. If you do this alone, you'll get all the credit. But she counters by obliquely pointing out that if it doesn't work, I'll get all the blame, too. So this is why, from her point of view, Bariel needs to be involved. But again, she can certainly blame him if he's dead, especially,
Yeah, but but also she was a bad bee before, right? Like cutthroat. Her and John
Larroquette.
Who was she? Who was the guy who didn't want to be on Star Trek and he didn't want his name on the credits? And she was conspiring with.
From the Circle.
Yeah, I'm blanking. He's problematic.
Yes. I was going to look him up, but he's not credited on purpose.
You all know who we're talking about. They had all these plans. You'd think that she could handle a negotiation, right? Like, she could hardball this guy and at least...
Franklin Jella.
Yeah. And in the worst case, walk away from the talks and be like, they're unreasonable and take the... It doesn't make any sense. It's not... Like this isn't Kai Wynn.
No, the Wynn we've known this whole time would have 6 different ways to handle this and not want Bariel to be making any of the decisions.
Now, I do like the subtle point they make by, she can dismiss all of the... let's call them selfish or reasons to care about Wynn's or Bariel's health here by hiding behind religion, which I think is a kind of a subtle point. Just saying, oh, well, the prophets deem it, right? Anything you don't want to deal with complicated wise, you're like, well, we're just following the prophets. Or So I think that is a cool little point, but it's lost in the sea of other things that are not...
Well, her being self-serving and her, nakedly political avarice here, that is Wynn. It's her helplessness that's not Wynn. Anyway, he calls her a coward, and she says he made his decision. And Doctor, I won't forget what you said here.
Badass line, and he says, neither will I.
Neither will I. Best scene in the episode.
100%.
And I think Siddig does a tremendous job.
Yeah, in 3 episodes, I think Bashir is now one of my favorite characters.
Oh, I mean, it's been a complete upgrade, and I think Alex Siddig has done a tremendous job turning the battleship that was this character. And certainly, when you go toe to toe with Louise Fletcher, like that's hats off. Even when she's sick. So we go to Sisko's quarters, and Ben asks Jake about the date, and he knows that Jake and Nog aren't speaking to each other. Jake was totally embarrassed by his behavior, naturally. They both tear off the tiniest pieces of roll as opposed to eating them because clearly this scene took a lot of takes to shoot. Oh yes, we're having dinner. It was pretty funny. Sisko says Nog was just acting like a Ferengi, and you can't blame him for that. And Jake points out that you said Ferengis and humans can't be friends. Ben, to his credit, says, I was wrong about that. You should talk this over before this becomes a bigger problem. So the Jake Nog story of this, I really like. It's very Star Trek. It's very finding ways to continue to be friends from different cultures with different thoughts and ideas, and like it's really great. And to see the change from Sisko, right? His having changed his mind, because in season 1 he's like, don't be friends with the Ferengi, and he's now on the opposite side. So there's a version of this story that I think is a really good story and a really good episode. They just didn't do it this time. So in the infirmary, Bariel is crashing again. Wynn is there. Bashir is pissed. The Vasikin, the drug, has damaged his brain, and now it's irreversible. So we head to Act 5. Bashir, Wynn, Sisko, and Kira meet to discuss the situation. Bashir can replace his organs, but he's afraid to replace parts of his brains with positronic implants, which, if you're keeping track at home, that's what Data's brain is made out of.
So this is no longer illegal? I thought augments were... Didn't we just spend a whole Strange New World episode talking about how augments are illegal?
Genetic
Oh,
augments.
right.
Not
These are all
technological.
physical. Okay.
These are physically replacing organs, and it's like eugenics versus technological stuff. But I understand why that would be a little bit of a subtle delineation there.
Because aren't you going head first into becoming Borg?
A little bit, but he's not connected to the network, so it's fine.
Yeah, well, there's an offline mode.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, just don't Wi-Fi enable. But he says, I don't want to do it because the brain is where the spark is, i.e. the soul. Interesting. So Wynn says Bariel would want a zombie brain. And Kira says, you know what? Actually, he would want it. Do it. So they're going to put in part of his brain.
Weird choice from Kira too here, in my opinion. I mean, she's not wrong. She's not wrong, but then the 360 beat shift she does to the last scene doesn't make any sense to me in that case.
Well, I mean,
guess grief is the only thing that can close that gap for me.
It's all based on the premise they're forcing us to accept without really explaining why now, why this is so essential right this very moment. And from her standpoint, again, she knows Bariel, and if this is the door is closing, you will never get this. You can save Bajor in a way that will have repercussions for generations. Yeah, Bariel would want it. He would want to sacrifice himself for that. We don't know that the door is closing. So Jake goes up to Odo and asks to be arrested. So Odo arrests him, and Jake Jake up and Nog and lock them in a holding cell together. Jake's forced them together to get a chance to talk. We head back to the infirmary, which is clever.
Okay.
I mean,
sure,
possibly mildly illegal, because I believe that's abducting a child. But whatever. It's from the heart's in the right place. So in the infirmary, Bariel has the positronic implant, but now he's more robot than person. He's lost all emotion and affect. When you touch me, it doesn't seem real. It feels like the distant memory of a touch. That's never. You never want to hear that on a date. If you hear that, it's probably No,
that was it's weird. Jen put it in her vows.
All right, so our next show, Keith and Mike buy a house together.
Murder Shack on Main Street.
Murder Shack buddies. Keith and Mike renovate this shack.
Who gets top bunk? The newest podcast.
Like the first episode, we're like drawing the masking tape to the center of the house. It can only have the left and the right.
You said you were getting Chinese food today.
Yeah, we've had that conversation.
We have.
You forget we have lived together.
Uh-huh.
Oh my God, yes.
Never forget.
Never forget. Anyway, so we head back to the holding cell, and Nog can tell it's a setup. Jake admits it and says he's sorry. He forgot that Nog was a Ferengi, and forgot they have such large cultural differences. Nog explains that traditional Ferengi females chew their men's food, and they are both disgusted by each other's customs. But Jake says, I still don't want to lose you as a friend. They agree not to have any more double dates, and they'll deal with the cultural differences as they come up. They're good, but of course comedically still trapped in the holding cell. I mean, honestly, if the thing that they had conflict over were a little less
was literally
ridiculous,
anything else.
If it just weren't so ridiculous, this is a scene, right? Certainly in my life, I have friends and neighbors and people I've come across. I'm like, ooh, you and I profoundly disagree on that, and whether it's a religious difference or a cultural difference or political difference, but I can still be friends with that person. Like, oh, yep, you and I, we are not aligned on that, but we can agree on these things.
I totally get that, but there are consequences to specific actions, right? So let's, just to to drag this out a little bit, let's say you and said friend who had religious differences or whatever, and they treated their women a certain very subservient way or whatnot, which is also their prerogative, right? Maybe not prerogative. Maybe that's the wrong phrasing, but that's not your place to. Well, you could argue that it is, but regardless,
it's murky. It's
if you go to a dinner, right?
Right.
And they start to treat your girlfriend, your wife, your partner
that's very different
in a certain way that is not aligned with the way you behave culturally, you have every right to be pissed, and it would be a much harder way to a much harder reconciliation, and a couple of apologies would probably be owed. That would make the cut
for sure. And I think the message here is not that they have to be okay with it. Like, I have to you know what, second thought, that was reasonable, and that was okay behavior, and you don't deserve an apology. It's just an agreement to keep working on it together.
Yeah.
And to try to navigate it as best you can.
I know, but then it was played as like a joke scene. Although I want to commend both of the young women, the young actresses in that scene. I thought that they fought against the comedic nature of the scene.
Yeah, no, they played it straight.
And I thought that helped make it less like vomit on myself.
Yes, for sure. So Cisco does a station log.
Also, this Ferengi is awesome.
Oh yeah.
Weren't we talking like a week ago or something about like we need characters of all shapes and sizes? Like this Ferengi's like a short, like older Ferengi.
Are you saying that I'm finally represented on this?
Keith, you got your scene.
It's got your height and my BMI and both of our oldnesses.
And a hell of a suit, working right at Emerald City. Well, that's a horse of a different color.
Emerald City. One short day. All right, so Cisco does a station log. The peace treaty has been signed. It worked, and everybody is celebrating. A Ferengi hands out Romulan ale, which is pretty hilarious because it's a running joke that it is illegal, and yet everyone is always drinking it everywhere.
Oh, that is funny.
Dax comes up to Bashir and says, "Hey, cheer up. You helped make this happen." Quark brings a giant bowl of brown goop. He's named it Kai Wynn. It looks sufficiently disgusting. Hilarious.
This is a very funny scene.
Oh, I mean, and it is such a sophisticated joke. I made this. It's an honor. I named this bowl of poop after you, and everybody wants it.
Everybody loves it. And wants somebody he's like holds it up to her.
Yeah, and it's made of like chocolate and some sort of a slug goo.
Uh-huh.
It's fantastic. Bashir gets a call. There's a medical emergency. The other half of Bariel's brain, of course, is failing. Kira is there and asks that it be replaced too. But Bashir says, I won't do it. Kai Wynn says, let him go. She's both right and gross in her motivations. And this is where there's the Kai Wynn we know. Welcome back. Poor Kira begs for his life, but Bashir won't do it. If I replace the rest of his brain with the machine, he won't be him anymore. He'll just be a machine. Let him go. Which I think is right and heartbreaking and real, but also this is the same universe as Data. Like, I'm a machine, but I'm a person. Maybe there's a worthy life form there that is working through that.
Well, that's how Data was to start with. This is not. This is like taking.
Right. It wasn't
person and like upgrading them to a Data.
Yes. But it's a tough call because Bariel's not conscious to make the decision for himself.
That's true, but we also met half. If that was half zombie Bariel, what's full zombie Bariel? And if it was only the memory of a distant touch, maybe there's no touch at all. I mean,
no touch, no
Kira's
touching.
losing her boyfriend one way or the other.
Yeah, now we're back to my life. But if you, I feel like they also probably could have at some point through the process asked Bariel what he would have wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, the treaty's good. If this fails, do you want to be a full robot? But I guess not. So Kira asks how much time. He says 3 hours. And she talks to him and kisses him goodbye while easily winning her Oopsie Award.
Totally, yeah.
And in this pretty not great episode, damn it, by the end, they did finally get me. Because of Nana's performance.
Totally.
Here.
It's a very beautiful scene.
It's a tremendous... There's O.J. Simpson.
What? Oh, you had it in the wrong folder, didn't you?
I put it in the regular folder.
You must have put it in the screens folder.
Oh, maybe that is what I did. Okay.
Well, there he is.
So from that heartbreaking, Emmy-worthy performance from Nana Visitor, we'll finish with OJ in North Korea. Yeah. All right. So much to talk about. We're going to skip the vocab quiz because I'm not sure. I don't know if it's fun anymore. But you know what is fun? It's time to come along home.
2, 3, 4.
Mike, are you preparing for your dance call of the AlamarEmmys theme?
AlamarEmmy, count to 4. Something
Count
like
to 4. Then one more. Yoo! Yeah, great. Folks, send us your AlamarEmmy dances. We'll show them on the show.
Doof.
Okay, so let's talk about wormholes in the plot. We've identified a lot, but just to recap.
Mm-hmm. The utter lack of stakes, I think, as to why the ticking clock is what is causing the ticking clock. Why must they complete this treaty negotiation right now within the next? Because he said he wanted him in stasis for like a couple weeks.
Well, but he didn't know what the solution was going to be, so potentially it could have been stasis for a long time.
Right.
But
so there's
still
that.
Could have spent a couple weeks.
Also, Keith calls it hopelessness, but I just remember once Kai Wynn becomes Kai, wouldn't she have been briefed on all the negotiations? Wouldn't she have been a part of them? Why is she so undereducated on what's going on?
I mean, she's the lead negotiator, the whole thing. I think that like Bariel's been doing, because these big time negotiations are usually 90% done by the underlings, and then the big kids come in at the end.
Also, are we to take from this that Kai Wynn has now become less of a villain? They really set her up to be a villain. If I'm not mistaken, there was an assassination plot.
Bariel killed.
It was like an assassination plot in when they were running against each
other.
She tried
to take over the government by collaborating with the Cardassians knowingly.
There's a lot of stuff. So I feel like she's just, it's not just the flu, man. They wrote her very weak and helpless in this, and it seems like she'd have a plan B and a plan C and a plan D and all kinds of underhanded things if the talks didn't go the way they meant. Maybe it was a redemption arc for her, but if that's the case, then they make a lot of morally questionable calls medically for Bariel along the way.
No, because I don't think it's a redemption arc, because like she basically kills Bariel.
Right, and then she'll make sure that he gets the. So anyway, that's our biggest wormhole, and then and her character retcon / or just behavior is a. I also think everyone being so quick to. I mean, it's implied. The stakes are implied because everybody's so quick to just make his judgment for him. But then the Jake and Nog thing, I feel like there's a wormhole there in that there's a disconnect between, I think, what the thesis of the plot is supposed to be versus the choice of specific cultural difference they chose to focus on. And I guess those are my two main pain points in wormholes, Keith.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it. I mean, I think it just working backwards, that the Jake Nog thing, I don't even mind it being about the Ferengis' misogyny. Right? Like that's very clear. It's very defined. It's a cultural difference that has that would come up like this. It's just sort of handled in such a for both Wynn and for Nog. They wrote these characters like somebody who had read a paragraph about what the character is, but really hadn't seen any of the other episodes, and really didn't understand these characters. So, yeah, I mean, the Jake Nog, it's just good idea executed sort of ham-fistedly. The Wynn thing is fascinating because I think her character is so layered, and her different abilities to manipulate is very layered. She has a lot of tools in her tool chest to get her way, cats, and cause trouble. So, all right. So if you wanted to write a story where her tool of manipulation here was, because she was afraid of this going wrong, she wanted to lay the blame at Bariel's feet. She wanted to protect herself. And that, okay, so if her tool was, oh, let me pretend that I'm weaker and more confused and more reliant on him than I am, so that I can, like, oh, it's his fault, I didn't do it. Okay. But I don't think that's what they wrote. Because I think what they wrote there was her lack of confidence and her sort of feeling helpless and reliant on him seemed like that was being played straight. Like, yes, she was actually feeling that. And that I don't understand.
Or what if she's off screen or like on a display and he's there for the talks, and every time they beam in to talk to her, she's like, this has to get done now. Having her there, it showed a weakness that was, like you said, antithetical to the character, and it just didn't work. It just doesn't work for me, for us.
Yeah. All right, so let's talk about best moments.
Yeah. I think we both agree I think the whole performance really of Dr. Bashir in this episode, specifically that scene between him and Wynn.
Yeah. But
for the sake of different, I'll let you expound on that. But I think I'll go with, I didn't really love the scenes with Bariel and Kira together. But when you just make him be dead and have her act above him, on top of him, it's much more effective. You know what I
mean? Ooh, I'm sorry. You want to take that dagger out of his back? He's already dead, buddy.
See, the chemistry was much more palpable in that scene because she was emoting it, and then she goes back. She's like, I remember when I first saw you. I wish we could have seen the romance she begins to describe. Because to be frank, Keith, a lot of the scenes of the way they showed us their romance was them hooking up. There's just a lot of hooking up and a lot less of.
You know what? I think that's a really good point, because their romance basically was just they were super horny.
They were horny, and they only had stolen moments together, like when he would come to visit her.
And great, and absolutely nothing wrong with that whatsoever, especially for two very busy people, and they're horny and they want to get it on. Okay, great. But you're right. They showed that part of the story. They didn't really show a love story.
Right.
They showed like a couple of powerful, busy people.
But in a pan out shot with Kira knowing she has 3 hours, and she said, "I remember the first time I saw you," and she's kissing. I got the empathy and the full flavor of how she felt about him, and yeah, especially with the music swelling and he's dead and it's in a goodbye. Of course, it gets you. It would have got us even more had we seen a little bit of that prior. So I want to commend Nana, and of course, it's not a judgment on his performance, but more so their whole chemistry or lack thereof. So it's a shame that the last time we got to see them, no, I guess they do it throughout this episode. The last episode they were really together was that wacky one where
where he was in love with Dax.
Yeah. So anyway, I'll shout out Nana again, and I'll let you talk for a second about that Bashir scene and Alexander Siddig.
Yeah. I mean, Nana elevated this episode by like 10 points in the last 10 seconds of it, because she's just that good. So hats off. But yeah, I think in terms of like from the writing standpoint, and kind of the only tension of the episode was the Bashir Wynn scene. And I think Alex, I mentioned it before, Alex said it did a fantastic job going opposite Louise Fletcher there. It was a great moment for his character, and it was also important for Wynn. Could you imagine how neutered Wynn would have been if she hadn't had that scene?
Mm-hmm.
Right, it would have been much worse. So I thought it was like that. There's a couple couplets of dialogue there that I thought were really well written and like got to more of the point that I think they were trying to reinforce in terms of what her motivations were. They just needed like 2 more scenes to actually explain what the heck was going on there. But what little of it we got in that scene was a really good scene. So now those are the 2 best moments for me. I think it's time to hand out some stem bolts.
You get some stem bolts.
Hell yeah.
They are self-sealing. Here are some stem bolts for you.
Okay. Mike, how many stem bolts are you going to scrape up for this here episode, Life Support?
You know, there are some redeeming qualities of this episode, and not the least of which, plot-wise, is we have a pretty big political breakthrough to kind of put a little closure on the Bajoran occupation by the Cardassians. I think that they agreed to some things, and there is some, maybe not a ton of accountability, but there's some wins there. So we get that. That's great. Now, as for the 2 plot points, it definitely makes a lot more sense now that you say it was like a fill in the blank. We want to do this Frankenstein episode, and we're going to kill off somebody. And then
we need to have somebody people are going to care about.
So, you know, I mentioned in the watch along right at top when they killed Bariel off camera, I was like, that's a crappy way to write a character off. And then once they brought him back, I was like, oh, now they're gonna give him a nice send off. Yeah. And look, what a hero's exit to be a part of the treaty that
he sacrificed his life for the peace.
It's
for the
just
treaty.
A shame that like the sacrifice feels rushed and feels
we don't know why.
Potentially unnecessary.
Right.
And maybe we missed something. It seems weird that we both missed it, and you've watched it like numerous times at this point.
Numerous times.
Yeah, so I don't feel that that's the case, but it's truly just feels a little lazy. You know, they're really smart at writing, having great actors doing great scenes at really key points to gloss over that. But the truth is even in the B story, a great point to make. Ben makes it very succinctly at the dinner scene, and I like that they stay friends. But the Nog and Jake stuff I really like is when there's a weakness between one of them, and then they use their friendship to kind of right the wrong. So when Nog couldn't read, Jake hides away. They find a place where they can tutor him. When, you know, the parents don't want them to be friends, they find a way to come together to show that it's a good thing that they are friends. Here, even once the prank to imprison them together happens, there's no, here's how we can resolve the mess we made. Let's apologize to the girls. Let's do this. Like nothing. Yeah. We don't fix it. We just say, hey, you know what? This is friendship. Sometimes we're gonna agree to disagree. Which
I'm going to agree to disagree in our friendship. I like the message of I don't know. Sometimes it's hard. Is actually like.
I agree with you.
Valuable.
I agree
lesson.
with you, but I just don't think picking something that I think we can ostensibly say is a terrible part of. Look, we still do business politically with China. But there are human atrocities taking place. We choose to shrug our shoulders and say, well, that's how they're doing things, and we don't agree, but I don't
really like your Saudi money, says the wrestlers.
I don't necessarily think that is like the point I would make. The example I would use for hey, let's all be buddies and we're gonna have to just agree with, or we're gonna have to accept people's differences in order to be friends. It's not a good example.
No, I think that's a really good point, because there's a continuum, right? Where it starts off by like accepting the differences is the morally upstanding thing to do, like morally upstanding, tolerant of differences, accepting of differences, I guess. And then somewhere along the line, what they're doing is so bad, it is not morally upstanding to stand aside and still be friends with the Klansmen or whatever it is, like. Right, and so, we're somewhere along that span is where you have to turn and say, like, no, I want to be tolerant, I want to be respectful, I want to embrace diversity of ideas and behaviors, but at some point it does click over, and it's an interesting thing to explore there.
So that's my problem. It's not in the message. It's in the example they chose to make the point. It neutered it slightly.
It was too extreme.
Yeah.
It was too extreme.
But which is funny to even be discussing it, because it's clearly just it was supposed to be like a funny aside that was taking place.
Right.
So it really isn't supposed to be that deep, and yet you made it that deep.
I'm sorry, have we met?
Yeah. No, I don't mean you. I mean the episode.
Yeah.
So it's funny. Aside from Kira's actual performance of Kira and Bashir, and like even Ben's response to Jake there, where he's just like, it's casual. He just kind of tosses it off, which does show growth on his part, but once it's just all muddied. That's my problem with the episode. Kira got me because of Nana, but
Right.
I didn't give two shits. When he did kill him in the first 5 seconds, I was like, all right, good. We don't have to look at that anymore. But they lose a little bit of the cool stuff I liked about the Bajoran Kai situation, which was the weird political backstabbing coup, all that kind of cool stuff.
Yeah.
You know, with the masks and the big halls and the. But that seems to be done now. I don't know. Is Kai Wynn out? Is she still in? What's happening? Anyway, I couldn't be more meh. It's like the mehest of meh feelings I have. Doesn't mean it was bad, but
It's got to be a number.
And if it was about the Frankenstein thing, I feel like we didn't spend enough time on it. It wasn't about that. It was more about the negotiations and the ticking clock, the abstract ticking clock, instead of is he more man than cyborg? Which I think was supposed to be the point too, but it kind of got muddy. Anyway, Keith, meh. 68.
68. Yeah, I mean, I don't need to keep dunking on this episode, because I agree with all of those things. Just a couple of little observations about it.
Pip and pop, maybe.
I'm gonna pip and pop. One thing that is a little bit of a breadcrumb here that gets dropped, that I think is sort of interesting to highlight, is Wynn's realizing the Cardassians are up to something in this negotiation. That got dropped and then dropped. They dropped the breadcrumb, then dropped the story there, and Bariel dismissed it. But it'll be interesting to see whether that grows into anything. So I think that part of it is interesting. Yeah, I think you're right about killing off Bariel. I think fine. I feel sort of like, okay, sure, whatever. It's probably for the best in the show from a storytelling standpoint. Opens up some avenues and closes some other doors of stuff that we weren't that interested in. But the neutering of Wynn is I think the most problematic part of this episode. That just didn't feel right to me. But you're right. Nana Visitor grieving a tennis ball, would make you feel something because she's that good, and so it really is something to be said. So I think you're right. There are some thematic things. I don't hate what they tried to do in this episode, right? Negotiations, some sort of a medical emergency where he has to sacrifice himself to make this negotiation happen. Wynn trying to figure out how to manipulate him, how can she set up a fall guy for the negotiations if it doesn't go well, and take the credit if it does go well? Sure, great. Cardassians up to stuff, great. The idea of the cultural differences stuff, how do you be friends with somebody who is so culturally different? Great, interesting, love it. But none of it is executed that well.
They also neutered themselves a little bit by what I expected to happen. I forgot to mention this. There's always been really furtive and great tension, combustible tension between Kira and Kai Wynn. Don't trust one another. So here's a perfect situation to set the chess pieces of Kai Wynn keeps pushing to alter Bariel to get what she wants, and Kira's fighting on his behalf against it. And
100%.
Bajor,
yes.
and but we don't
it
get
is
none of
such
it.
a
She's
missed
like,
opportunity.
Yeah, okay, do it.
Yeah. such a missed opportunity to not end this with like Kira, like, you killed my boyfriend.
Yeah.
And you didn't need to, or something like that.
Well, she took her side the whole time. Every time
Yeah.
Bashir offered a counterpoint or a
Clearly, Kira got the memo of what the ticking clock was.
Yes, correct.
The rest of us didn't. All right, so that ends up to me, you know, I didn't love it. I give it a 65 self-sealing stem bolts. Folks, did you agree? Did you disagree? How many stem bolts do you give it? I'm super curious what people think about this episode. So definitely give us a rating. Any of your thoughts and observations also very welcome. If you want us to read it on the air, give us one of them super tips. We'll be delighted to do so. You can find all of our social medias here on the screen. You can find us at patreon.com/KNM. Check out other shows. Look at my Star Trek toys, KNM Geekly, and Strange New Show. Keith and Mike watch Strange New Worlds. Next week, we will be back here with an episode I really enjoy, Heart of Stone. Should be
autobiographical.
Yeah, exactly. In great character work in this next episode. Gonna be fun.
All right.
So we will see you back here next week. Till then, this has been Keith and Mike Watch Deep Space Nine. Thank you for watching KNM Entertainment. If you enjoyed our particular brand of nonsense, please like and subscribe. Or become one of our patrons at patreon.com/KNM.